Well, I gotta tell you that it just occurred to me that there's no four guys on the planet that love drag racing any more than the four guys that are sitting in front of your camera right now. I mean, Jim, when did you go to the drag strip the first time?
Well, I went in '64. I got my driver's license on a Thursday, and 2 days later I went to Martin, the world famous Martin US 131 drag race. My first out-of-town trip. I'd been dying to get there, didn't have any way to get there, and when I got my driver's license, I was on my way. And as I was telling Jeff last night, a couple interesting things. I learned to drive in a '57 Chevrolet, and my very first car was a Hemi. So a couple of real icons in the sport, and I had them both to start my driving career with.
And
I remember my dad had a string of gas stations in the San Fernando Valley. I was just a kid, you know. I'm not sure I even had my license yet. Guy says, you ever been to the Saugus drag strip? I said, no, never been. He took me there, and it changed my whole life.
now, who was this man?
Just a guy that was working with in the gas station,
Oh,
and
I
I was
see.
working for my dad.
Uh-huh.
And, well, this is for me. Same thing happened to me at Bonneville. Went up there with a couple of guys. I said, I'm never coming back here without a car.
Yeah. Now, show us your ring and tell us a little bit about the.
Oh, my 200 mile an hour, is that flashing too much there?
Awesome.
255, 501.
255,
In
501.
1961.
In 61. I was born in 51. When I was 10 years old, Don was going 250 miles an hour at Bonneville.
In a really, really sketchy car.
Yes.
Had 41 Ford power steering in
What
it.
was it?
It was a belly tank.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it was a really, really rugged car. Just got really lucky. We for some reason, we fell into a lot of luck because the cooling system was so
oh,
well,
really?
which is the key up there.
It is.
So,
What was it powered by, Don?
had a 300-inch Dodge Red Ram in it,
Oh, jeez. A 6-cylinder?
and with stock rods.
Well, that'd been a small
V8.
Hemi.
That would be a
Oh,
small
it'd be
Hemi.
like a 2.
About, I think they made those in what, 51?
Well, Dodge never got their first Hemi until '56, and never got the small one until '57.
Well, this must have been something else then, because I know it was a Hemi, and it was 1961, so we got it somewhere.
Yeah.
Those were stock heads and stock rods.
No kidding.
And we went down at 272, and the record was 240. And we came back and smoked 2 pistons, but were able to coast through. And
So
get
you
the
have to
record.
back up like an NHRA record?
No,
You
at
have
Bono, you always try to get a record. You got to go and make a run. First, you have to qualify for the long course when you go over 200 miles an hour, which is a 5-mile course. So you qualify for that course, and then you drive your car there. And if you go over the record, that allows you to come back the next day. And so you get up in the morning, go out there, go down, you have a half hour to work on your car, come back, and if the average is over the old record, you're in. And if you're running 200 miles an hour, you know, in that area, you get one of these. See,
And you've had that since 61?
1961.
Wow.
It was a long time ago. And then I went drag racing.
Well, now Joel spent some time in the circle track world with Dale Earnhardt Sr. Was Junior around at the time? Or
He was.
So he was a little boy, I would imagine, at that time.
We were building motors for Dale Earnhardt's children, including Junior and Carrie and the sister. And they were doing late model racing at the time, and they were just being raised up in the sport. And when Dale Jr. began driving in the sport, we had done some motors for him. We were building motors for them at the time. And so that's kind of where he got his start.
Now, what was the favorite parts of Dale Sr.? What did you like about working with him, or what did you like about going to his shop or being a part of his winning teams? What was that like?
My favorite part was making more power. I was that's an issue with me, and there's never enough, and there's always more to be had. So I'm just constantly searching there.
Amen, hey Jim?
And so I was taking notes when he said stock rods. Is that a trade secret? Is that a horsepower secret?
I don't know. We ran stock rods and we didn't bend them, but I'll tell you, they were called Don's Box Rods, and I can't remember the name. I think the guy's name was Don Yates. He took a little beam of steel and welded them
Oh, no kidding, so he's
on each
strengthening
side
the
of the rod.
Wow.
Well, see,
And
our,
everybody at Bonneville ran those rods.
no kidding. In my early days, in the late 60s, early 70s, when I started to drive the Chevelle, we were twisting a small block Chevrolet over 9,000, and we had stock rods. But we were doing it with an engine shop in Detroit called Diamond Racing Pistons, and Jim Cavallero was blueprinting our rods. Butch Elkins at that time was one of the top cylinder headquarters in the United States and did a lot of things for the NASCAR world in the Detroit area. Diamond did the rat roaster intake manifolds for Chrysler and for the Holly intake manifold program back when they first started.
Iron manifolds?
Yes,
Really?
and they were doing the original, like the Winners type cast manifolds when Holly first got into the intake manifold business. I want to say that was probably in the mid-70s, early 70s. So we grew up at the racetrack, and every weekend we were chasing around going to Englishtown, New Jersey, or Gainesville, Florida, or we of course loved Indy, and had an opportunity to set 6 NHRA national records in the Superstock world. And Jim was there at the racetrack. Don, we probably didn't know each
I
other,
remember
but you
Jim
were.
with that picture in the station wagon.
Yeah,
What class
that's,
was that in anyway?
G-Stock automatic.
yes. So, I mean, we've all personally been down lots of racetracks. Joel grew up in Texas, so
I
the,
actually got my start in drag racing. That's where I started. My
What
father
drag
was
strip did you
my
go to?
Lubbock. Actually, I've attended several inaugural races, including one in Amarillo, Texas. I believe it was in 1969.
That used to be our first stop on the tour.
oh, really? So you'd go from California to,
Yeah, that was our first stop.
yeah, and then where did you go from there?
Oh, Tulsa, and then probably back in US 30 in Gary, Indiana. We marched
Now,
back.
how about Indianapolis?
I ran Indy when they ran points races and match races and stuff.
Now, Jim, you gotta tell us a little bit about your history with the points meets at IRP and going to the U.S. Nationals. Can you give us a little history lesson
Well,
here?
sure I can. I graduated from high school in '65 and loved racing. I loved it even before I ever went, and I always knew I wanted to be there. But in '66 I went to the Indy Points Meet, and from '66 now to 2010, that's 45 years, and I've only had 2 conflicts where I wasn't able to attend. In those 45 years, I've only missed 2 years. And one of them I was actually there, but the event rained out, and I had a trip to Germany scheduled for 3 weeks later, and they scheduled the points meet, the rain date, at the same time as my Germany trip. The other time was when Berger had their big anniversary, and they wanted me to come and relive the glory days. The other big event for me at Indy is the famous U.S. Nationals. I didn't go until '67, a landmark year. Wenzel's first win, Bill Jenkins won Superstock. New Camaro's out that year, and they won stock and Superstock both. And from '67 to '09, I've never missed a year. And as they say, God willing, I'll be there again this
That's
year.
amazing.
Yeah, that's,
That is- yeah, that's-
now, never missed
I
one year
would,
going to Indy.
Well,
I would stay home from Germany for the U.S. Nationals. If that ever gets rained out, Germany loses and Indy wins.
Tell us just a little bit about Berger Chevrolet, Jim, and the parts, in the old parts business that people know you.
Well, as Don mentioned, I raced a Pontiac, and the reason I raced a Pontiac was because it had the 4-speed hydromatic transmission. And by comparison, the Chevys of that day had the Power Glide, which was only 2-speed. In later times, they did a lot of funny stuff with the Power Glides, with different gear ratios and custom-made cases and all sorts of things. But in '67, there was no way a 2-speed Power Glide could keep up with a 4-speed hydromatic. So I built a Pontiac. I always thought it'd be easy to make a Chevy go, and if you made a Pontiac go, you made a little more distinction to yourself. Well, NHRA came along and they allowed the Chevys, under a very obscure Canadian rule, to run the Hydromatic in a sedan delivery because it was a truck, and supposedly the Hydromatic was legal in trucks. Well, when you combine the high-revving Chevy engine with the Pontiac Hydromatic transmission, that was the end of the poor little Pontiacs. And then there was a time when sedan deliveries held every NHRA automatic record from F automatic to N automatic, different years, different engines, 2 4-barrels, 1 4-barrel, different combinations, different weights.
How much did the thing weigh?
But my car weighed around 3,600, not terrible. It was a 2-door wagon, the lightest one made. But to get back to Roger's question, the coolest place in our town was a place called Berger Chevrolet, who really ran on. And if you really wanted hardcore stuff, you had to go there. Even if you were a Pontiac guy, if you wanted an offset cam key or something like that, that was where you went to get it. So, because I did my shopping there, I got to know the owners pretty well. And in 1968, they asked me to join. And at that time, I had a pretty good career in the food industry. But I loved racing so much, I took an unheard of pay cut of $25. This was at a time when you only made $90 a week, so a $25 pay cut was a pretty significant cut to join the speed industry. And the rest, as they
is
say,
history.
43 years later, the rest is history.
Well, you guys have always been in the gas wars. I was in the nitro wars.
Oh,
Yeah, we're door slammers back
Sitting
there.
behind the motor and smoking pistons and
Yeah, we didn't talk
getting
much.
all the oil in the motor.
You California guys were the wire wheelers, but back here in the Midwest, we're door slammers.
I don't know why we did it. It was a car club we were all in. You know,
Yeah, tell us a
Tommy
little bit about-
Ivo was in the club. Don Perdome was in the club. Tough club to get in. You had to have a racing-only car, something that wouldn't run on the street. And
Was that the Road King?
that was the Road Kings of Burbank. Still running. We had our 50th anniversary here about 4 or 5 years ago. But Ivo took off across the country, you know, and called some promoters, and he came back and said, "Come on, guys, let's go." And we all went. Safford, myself, Perdome, a whole bunch of us. Had a heck of a
You
good time.
you put on all these shows around.
Yeah, they were 3-run match races. They paid $2,500 for 3 runs.
Jim he takes all of our stories and writes beautiful language, and never miss a misspelled word or a bad grammar in any of our
Or a deadline.
or a deadline for all these years. Jim and I have worked for over 40 years together. So he will create catalogs and owner manuals and flyers and things. Don's responsible for getting all of the media broadcasted. Understand, he introduced us originally to James and Lloyd. He's responsible for kind of the original get-togethers, and Joel does the airflow, helps me with some of the shrouding and what goes on, with all the sophistication of air underneath the hoods of these vehicles. So thanks for coming to Bay City. This is an all-time first. It's likely the group of people that'll be here tomorrow will never ever get together again. It'll be the first and only. And I'm so happy to have your family here, your 2 boys. Thank you for coming and putting up with that long ride. Let's go out and have some fun and enjoy the rest of the evening.